All right. Welcome to week 10. Things are starting to like wind down and heat up. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, we have a special guest tonight that we'll get to. So my side of things will be a little short, which is probably good for some of you. Um, so before we kind of rehash like last week, let me get to this week's big games. The first one, and I'm excited about this, is, excuse me, best bet. So if I get this best bet correct, I'm at 5 of 5, meaning like I'm at 500%. No, not 500%. I'm you know, got as many right as I got wrong. I'm at 500. So I'm praying that I'm as good as a flip of a coin. So my bet this week, and we hit the bet we hit on last week was Washington covering against by 3.5. Yeah, and bet against USC, and it's turned out really well. Um, it looked like Washington wasn't going to be able to cover, but again, you get one or two stops against USC, and you're going to be able to just run all over them. So anyway, we got that one right. This week, UNT, the University of North Texas, is playing at SMU on Friday. SMU is a 16-point favorite. That line has already moved to 17. So I've technically locked it in at 16, but it always helps when the line moves. Saw SMU play OU earlier this year. That's a pretty good football team. They're statistically one of the best offensive and defensive combos in the country in the sense that like they're I believe top 10, let's just stretch it, top 20 offense and a top 20 defense, which is really well balanced. Here's their score line the past 5 games. We'll start in September. This is 2 weeks after the OU game. Charlotte, 34-16. Eastern Carolina, 31-10. They've won all these games, by the way. Temple, 55-0. Tulsa, 69-10. That game, I believe, was um, SMU had 50 points by half. And then Rice was close, but has played everyone pretty close this year. 36-31. Meanwhile, Texas, the University of North Texas, that is, they've lost to UT San Antonio, Memphis, Tulane. They beat Temple and they lost to Navy, and Navy is garbage. Um, what's crazy, one thing I will say to those of you who like to do the inverse McGinty, this may be a good play to do inverse McGinty. Now, how do you inverse that? Anyway, the Temple game, both teams have played Temple. Um, North Texas beat Temple 45-14, and SMU beat Temple 55 nothing. So that's pretty similar. So this may be a close game. Someone on Twitter was like, "Oh, this is Vegas bait. Like they're tricking us." So I think that North Texas is just not going to be able to hang. The nightcap. This is going to be kind of interesting. It's a 10:15 Eastern Standard Time game on ESPN and a Big 12 matchup. So I moved away from the Pac-12. The game that it would have been is USC at Oregon. A, we have enough, we've seen enough of USC. No one wants to watch that. Um, B, Oregon should blow them out. Like Oregon should totally take care of business. And C, I'm hitting Pac-12 after dark hard. Like anytime I can get it, bye. So we've gotten enough of that where we haven't had a BYU Iowa State. This is the first meeting between the two in the conference. This may be the first meeting ever. I don't know how to do a deep dive. But they both have the same record. They've both underperformed. I like Iowa State in this one, but it's going to be interesting because it's on the road in Provo, and that place can rock. Like that place is going to be rocking. So that's going to be a really interesting game. The spread for that game is Iowa State by 1.5, I believe. So Big 12 after dark, nice late night kick. against two teams that don't know each other very well and are like kind of figure out or trying to figure out like how good they really are. Um, the most intriguing matchup is going to be kind of the talk of tonight with me and my guest, and that is Rutgers at Iowa at 3:30 Eastern on the Big Ten Network. So we'll skip that. We're going to talk about Iowa a little bit later. But the spread for that is Iowa's favored by 1.5, and we'll talk about the rest of that game later. But that should be a really interesting game, especially with the way Rutgers played Ohio State close for three quarters. And then backyard brawl is going to be number 13 Utah at number 5 Washington at 3:30 on Fox. I think Washington is going to be a little bit not let down, but they've got they've had a rough road, and I think that USC game was exhausting because that was just a back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth on the road at night. And Utah doesn't come in with a lot of pizzazz in the way that like Washington had to play Oregon, Washington had to play USC, and like there was a lot of hype around all those games. There's not a lot of hype around this one, and I feel like that's when Utah gets you. They're going to be hit in the mouth. Now, I don't think Utah has the offensive firepower to keep up. If they had Cam Rising playing, I think they do, which is unfortunate. But don't be surprised if this is close going into the fourth quarter and is a low scoring game. I just think this again, it's a 3:30 Eastern kick, which means this is an 11:30 kick. Let's see, 2:30, 1:30, 12:30. So it's a 12:30 kick. That's when, the students aren't going to be up. I just think this is going to be a really interesting game. This is our backyard brawl. Two ranked teams. Um, and I think Utah just comes in with a chip on their shoulder. Look for something almost similar to the way the Oklahoma State Oklahoma game went, besides the fact that OU was on the road. And then last but not least, Michigan at Penn State. So this is number 11 Penn State with number 2 Michigan at 11 a.m. on Fox. That is early. There's some really interesting stats here. First of all, we've talked about it last week. There's a scandal around Michigan. The Pac-10, not the Pac-10, the Big Ten's gonna have to act. I don't know. Excuse me. I honestly think nothing's gonna happen. Why? Why do I think that? Because you either have two scenarios are gonna play out, and it could start this weekend. Michigan loses to Penn State, or more likely, they lose to Ohio State. Um, and that would put, unless those two teams screw it up down the road, like those teams in the driver's seat, especially Ohio State, in the for the Big Ten title game. But in essence, there's a good chance that Michigan, hopefully for the Big Ten, gets knocked out before they compete in the Big Ten title game. And I think for the most part, that allows them to kind of be like, hey, yeah, they cheated, but it didn't get them anywhere. Don't worry about it. We'll handle this in house. Da 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 da. The other thing, so that's why I'm like, I think Michigan will take care of it before the Big Ten does, especially if they lose. But the scenario that I think is gonna happen is this is right now like the Big Ten's golden goose, and I think they just don't touch it because they see a potential national title coming to the Big Ten. I minus the cheating, think that Michigan is the best team in the country. Period. And I've had them in my top spot in the rankings for a while. This is going to be a big test, but honestly, I don't think Penn State's going to do anything. Penn State just can't match up. And you saw that with like Ohio State. They just can't do it. Here's some stats, and then we got to kick it. Penn State trails the all-time series 16-10. The teams, however, have split the past 6 games, so 3-3. And then Penn State fell to Michigan in Ann Arbor last year, 41-17. I think a similar scoreline is gonna play out this year. It may be a little bit lower in the sense that it's like 36-20, with Michigan coming out ahead, but I think obviously Penn State is better than they were last year, but I think Michigan's insanely better than they were last year. After holding Maryland to negative 49 yards, Penn State leads the country in rushing defense. So that'll be really interesting because that's definitely one of the strengths of this Michigan team. Um, Penn State has also held each of its last 8 opponents under 100 yards, and that is the longest active streak in the FBS. So that's strength against strength. And I think, but again, I think they'll shut it down and they'll set up some interesting plays going in. I don't think Michigan's coming in here to think they're going to pound the run game. Um, Penn State paces the nation in sacks per game and ranks fourth in tackles for loss per game. And they are tied for first with 24 players who have recorded at least a full tackle for loss. And first in the FBS with 19 players who have recorded at least one sack. Here's the other thing that's crazy is that the Nittany Lions are favored by ESPN's predictor that I moved away from a little bit, but it's always been like, huh, this is interesting. But again, it's a split. Um, ESPN's AI, like little predictor, has the Nittany Lions a 50.7% chance to win. So I don't know. I think Michigan, they probably heard so much about the cheating thing that they just want to go out and destroy people and be like show that they're really good. And I think of any week that Michigan would slip off, it'd be last week, and they didn't. Um, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure they played last week. Now I'm like, did they play last week? I'm pretty sure they did. Oh yeah, they played Purdue. Yeah, and that was 13-41. That was like not even a game. And that's like how crazy. That's the first time an opponent has scored more than 10 points. So it's nuts. Last thing, my rankings stay the same. Oklahoma's out at 10. Ole Miss is in. It pretty much mirrors the AP college poll, except Washington is ranked. I flip Washington above Florida State, and then Georgia and Michigan. Michigan 1, Georgia 2, Ohio State 3, Washington 4, Florida State 5, Oregon 6, Texas 7, Alabama 8, Penn State 9, and then Ole Miss 10. So, with that in mind, we will now go to our guest. All right, so Chris, tell me about your connection to Iowa.
Yeah, so I grew up in Des Moines, followed the Hawkeyes from birth, basically. Um, Went to the University of Iowa for undergrad, spent 5 years there. I was in the band for 3 years, so I went to every football game, bowl games, the whole thing. I was fully invested in the Iowa culture.
Like, how would you describe like Iowa culture? Be it like the
Ooh, you
college or the state, like any or where those begin and end. Like, I have no idea.
Yeah, so as far as the state goes, it's mostly rural farmers, like hardworking people, just salt of the earth. Um, the University of Iowa is interesting though, because it's where a lot of students from Chicago go. So like Chicago suburbs, a lot of kids come there for school. I would, similar to maybe someplace like OU, you get a lot of like Dallas suburbs people that come up there and then go back to Dallas. You get a lot of people at Iowa from the Chicago suburbs. University of Iowa is not the ag school. That's Iowa State. University of Iowa is the more, business school, law school, medical school,
You just say
that kind of
prestigious
place.
institution.
Yes, it is the
Okay.
flagship university of the state of Iowa.
How far is it from Chicago?
Um, 3.5 hours, depending on where
Okay.
in Chicago we're talking about. It's not terribly far.
Okay, so it's like as far as A&M and UT are from Dallas, basically.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Just far
So
enough that you can go there for school, but if you want to go home on the weekend, yeah, you can easily just pack up the car and go.
okay. All right. So Kirk Ferentz, did I pronounce his name correctly?
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right, because it feels wrong when I say it. Um, so he was hired in 99.
Yep.
And so when did you start at
I
Iowa?
started in 2000. My first year at Iowa was the fall of 2000.
So his second year.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've seen his entire career, like
Like
essentially up
everything
close.
from basically from the beginning. Yeah, from like I think we won 3 games in 2000, which
Oh wow,
was an
okay.
improvement over winning 1 game in 99.
So
you
was the
know.
program like what was the state of the program before he got there?
Yeah, so before he got there, his predecessor is Hayden Fry, who is kind of, I think it's safe to call him a legendary coach in college football. I mean, he took Iowa from complete irrelevance to like national prominence, especially in the 80s. Like Iowa was very good. Like there's a classic game of like Iowa, Michigan, where like it was like top two teams in the country. You had Chuck Long, who was the runner up for the Heisman, to a guy named Bo Jackson, no big deal.
Never heard of him.
Um, yeah, exactly. So like Iowa was really good in the 80s, solid in the early to mid 90s, and then it kind of started falling off. And by the time Hayden Fry retired, things were not good. Recruiting had kind of fallen off. The product on the field had fallen off a little bit, and it was just kind of time for him to go. And so, Kirk Ferentz inherits a team that is nowhere. I mean, they're basically at rock bottom for all intents and purposes. And like that first season, we won a game. 99, we won a single game. 2000, we won 3 games, and then it was just kind of slowly from there, kind of taken over. 2001, we I think we were like 6-5, went to the Alamo Bowl, beat
Okay.
Texas Tech in the Alamo Bowl. Texas Tech was their quarterback was Cliff Kingsbury at that time, that was fun. And then 2002 was when it really took off. 2002 was the season where like everything kind of changed. That team was stacked. And we lost 1 game all season. We dropped an early game to Iowa State. We had the lead and we dropped it at the end of the game. And then we didn't lose another game the rest of the season. And played USC in the Orange Bowl, had the Heisman runner up. And that team had like Dallas Clark and, like Robert Gallery was a left tackle.
Oh
And
yeah.
that team was just stacked with talent.
Who was the Heisman runner up?
Brad Banks was the quarterback
Oh my
for
God.
University of
Okay.
Iowa.
I'm with you now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Because the Giants
so,
talked about drafting Robert Gallery.
yeah, he ended up going to, I can't remember where he ended up at Oakland. I don't know where he
Yeah, I think
went,
that's
maybe before
that's
then.
I
Yeah.
think that's right. I think that is exactly right. He had
Yep.
long hair, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
And
So
super nice dude. Anecdote, I think his major was like elementary education, which is great because there would always be these pictures posted of him like helping out little kids. And it's like massive. I mean, he's like gigantic man, just with all these little kids. It was great.
oh yeah, he's
So
huge. Okay, so like I'm trying to I do want to touch on one thing that I found interesting. Did you go to the Alamo Bowl
I did go to the
against
Alamo
Texas
Bowl.
Tech?
Yep.
You did?
Yep. Mhm.
So like I can't think of two more offenses that are diametrically opposed than Mike Leach's air raid and Ferentz's just I form smash mouth football, or was it different back then?
Well, it was a little more different back then. We had like the quarterback, if I remember that year, was John Butcher, and he was like a solid quarterback. Like we could throw the ball down the field, like we were moving the ball. Like the early Ferentz years were a little bit different than what we've grown accustomed to with like Ferentz football in say the last 10 years or so. Like it was a lot more balanced. It was a lot more even. Like the defense was good, but they weren't like amazing. The offense was solid. You know, it's still, I think I was always been more of like a run first kind of team, but we were not like wholly dependent on like running the ball every single down, you know?
Okay. So I mean that's part of the reason why like every week it's been growing in my mind of okay, I have to get Chris Cass on here because I've been slowly waiting for Iowa to just fall apart and collapse under the ineptitude that is their offense because
Yeah.
it's almost like the Giants. I hate to bring it back to the Giants because everything is falling apart currently.
Yeah.
And it feels like
Yeah.
that every year. Like as soon as you get hope, it falls apart.
Yeah.
But it's like just when you thought the offense couldn't get any worse, here we are,
Oh yeah, we are
right?
plumbing the depths of like what even is an offense in 2023. You know, like
Hunting.
technically there are guys that play like offense, but realistically the offense they're like the defense now. Like their job is to like just like move the ball down the field 8 yards and then get the punter to bury the ball on like the 6 yard line so that the opposing team gets a three and out and punts back, and then like, or, now they're trapped in their own end zone. So now the defense, like, like when a football team is backed up against their own end zone, that limits the playbook. And that gives the defense an opportunity to like, maybe disguise some coverages or bring some pressure or whatever to like maybe get a turnover or something to like that's kind of become like the winning playbook, which is like if you were to write, you could ask ChatGPT, like, how do you win a football game? That is nowhere on the list of things that you would say, and like it is almost kind of, you were saying, the complete opposite of the air raid. Like whatever the diametrically opposite thing of the air raid is, I think that's what Iowa does for football. It's like, okay, you want PlayStation numbers, you want 800 yards of offense? Haha. What if we gave you 100 yards of offense?
No, yeah. No, it's I have a few things I tried to do some prep, but one of the stats here was Iowa has gained less than 300 yards of total offense in 12 of their last 13 games.
Yeah.
Total
And how
offense.
many of those games have they won? That's the
They,
wild
they
thing,
they are
right?
10-3
Right.
in those games. No, well, and so that's the question of I've been waiting and waiting for the wheels to come off, and yet like here we are. And I think the thing that like a lot of people like who are casual college football fans like may not be aware of is it's kind of like the SEC where if you're in the SEC West, and when I say it's kind of like the SEC, the Big Ten is kind of like the SEC in the sense that if you're in the SEC West, you have such a slog to just get to the SEC title game because you have to go through Alabama, you have to go through LSU, you have to go through Texas A&M. Believe you have to go through Ole Miss. I mean, it's just like every murderer's row. But if you're in the East, well, now you get Vandy, and now you get South Carolina, and now you get
Yeah.
Kentucky,
Yeah.
and now it's just
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Florida has been wheels off. So for the Big Ten, y'all seem to be in the SEC East of the Big Ten, in the fact that you're in the Big Ten West.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's fair. Like when they initially split the conference this way, it wasn't like that. Like Wisconsin was like really good.
True.
Iowa was kind of like right behind them. Nebraska was a question mark, and it slowly kind of turned into that where like, yeah, I mean, Northwestern would like alternate like good year, bad year, good year, bad year, like kind of every season. And now like, Wisconsin is, they're trying to run the air raid, but they don't have the guys for that. And so it's going to take them a few years to figure it out. Minnesota is rowing the boat. I don't know what they're doing,
Right.
like Nebraska Matt Rule maybe in 3 seasons will be real good, but right now, nope.
Indiana.
Illinois, they've got Brett Bielema now. We'll see, and then there's Iowa that's like kind of just steady doing Iowa things. So it's definitely like when you look at the Big Ten East, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, just those three alone is enough to like, that's the conference. That is the conference, easily right now. Right now, at least, that's the state of affairs.
Right. And they have to play each other every year.
Yep. Yep.
So with all this ineptitude, Iowa is sitting at the top of the Big Ten West
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I have this right, like including this week, there are 3 games left
Yeah.
in the college football season. So I should have done a deep dive and I can pull it up and you may know it off the top of your head, but like who do they have left? So the most intriguing game this week for the primer is Rutgers versus Iowa.
Yeah.
And that game is crazy because it's the lowest over under in the history of modern college football.
Beating last week's lowest
Right.
historic.
Well, and so it's that's the crazy thing is we just said it. The rest of their schedule is Rutgers this weekend,
Yep.
Illinois next
Yep.
weekend, and
Yep.
Nebraska.
Yep.
And
It's also worth noting that Iowa is ranked right now.
yeah, well, again, it's one of those things where it's this train keeps going.
Iowa is ranked and USC is not ranked.
No, I don't and you and I have talked about this like ad nauseum. At some point, like Iowa was like pinnacle, like McGinty football.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
get 2 tight ends, a fullback, you set up the play action, you play ball control, milk the clock, and you don't turn the
The
ball over.
the prototypical, like the team that Iowa really wants to be is like the Ravens from like 7 years ago, right? Where it's just like great defense, like unbelievable defense, really great running game. Quarterback is fine. He's fine. But like they're just going to slowly just strangle the life out of you over the course of a game. That's the team that Iowa really wants to be, is just like shut down defense, pound the ball, a little bit of play action here and there, some like tight end passes underneath. We're going to beat you 17-10, but you're going to hate playing that game. Like that's who Iowa really wants to be. And they've got the defense part. I think they've
So
got
do
the
you
running
think
backs, but they don't have anything else.
so I think that's the thing that is just so like I have stayed away from watching Iowa play because you see the memes on Twitter where it's like
Oh yeah.
punt,
Oh yeah.
punt, 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 punt,
Yeah.
punt, punt.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I love football, but I can't watch that with the small amount of time that I have in my life to sit down and watch television. But as I sit here, I'm almost just like I have to watch them play Rutgers. I have to watch them play now the new lowest over under in the history of college football against a team that like held Iowa State in check for about 3 quarters
Mhm.
just a week ago. So like before we even ask you like what you think the outcome of the game is, one of the questions I have too is just like, do you think that Iowa's defense, be it scheme or personnel, is really like I don't know if saying like one of the best defensive units ever to be put on the field of college football? Because going back to their schedule, like I don't know who they've played that is offensively
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah. And this is a really good question. And for some context, we can look at when Iowa played Michigan this is cool. When Iowa played Michigan in the Big Ten title game. Michigan just blew them out, just blew us out completely, right? Like this wasn't even close. I think Iowa's defense in the last couple of seasons, excluding this year, has been really, really good. This year, I don't think it's as good. The pass rush is not as good. The secondary, like a bunch of guys went to the NFL, and so we don't have the same guys. I think this scheme helps a lot. They play a lot of zone, like they play a lot of zone looks. And so when you play a lot of zone, if you have disciplined DBs, they're going to make interceptions. It's gonna happen, right? If
Right.
if you have like really well-trained players playing in a zone first offense, they're going to come up with interceptions. That's just what happens. Especially if you can get some pressure. Iowa doesn't blitz a ton. They just kind of rely on a four-man rush. And so if you can get some pressure on the quarterback, force him into a bad throw, that's how the defense does what it does. What you'll see if you watch like Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State did this. Like if you can get a team who can start to either run the ball effectively or just has a really good quarterback who can make a lot of effective short passes, that's kind of the weakness. Is like if you make a bunch of short passes where you can set up the run game and then like open up for like a big play downfield, like that's where the weakness really lies. Now the reason Iowa's defensive stats are where they are is because most of the teams, to your point, that we have played so far this season can't do that. And this is kind of how Iowa is built. Like Iowa, like as a team philosophy, is not built to try and win a national championship every year. They're not built to try and win a conference championship every year. That's just unrealistic. And so instead, the game plan is like, what can we do to be competitive in every single game? Well, the thing that's competitive in every single game is like, don't give up big plays, be disciplined, get some pressure on the quarterback, and then rely on the offense to run the ball, get some play action going, and then, wait for the other team to make a mistake. That offense is like the same thing Wisconsin have been doing for the last several years, been very effective at it, right? It's just
Right.
like run the ball, run the ball, run the ball, run the ball, play action. We got you.
Do you think that the offensive ineptitude has, in some odd sense, made the defense stronger? Like, or is that just a misread? Because again, it's trying to like tie these to square a circle, so to speak,
Yeah, right,
is kind
right,
of what
right.
Iowa is, where like the offense is so bad
Yeah,
that
yeah,
they kind of what I'm going off of what you said earlier, where they just are like, we're gonna hold on to this ball as long as we can, even though it may just mean like 5 yards. Like we're gonna drag the play clock down to 0. We're gonna try to like hurt you as much as we can in those 5 minutes, and then we're gonna punt the ever living hell out of this ball and pin you in a way that like now we're gonna unleash the dogs who are
yep,
going to try to get a safety, or they're going to
yep,
try to like
yep.
keep you from moving. And that is just the game plan. Like your best offense is your defense.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like I don't know. I mean, it's hard to tell like if those things are related, but there's definitely some cultural component to that where it's like, all right, guys, like the offense isn't going to do it. Defense got to step up and make a play. Like that is absolutely like a mentality. I mean, like it's hard not to know that, when
Right.
like, listen, do you want to win the game or not? Those guys, we all know they're not going to do it. Who's going to? And that's what happens when you see like you'll see a lot of like interceptions return, fumble recoveries. You'll see a lot of like special teams, like punt returns. I mean, Cooper DeJean had, I don't want to like, that Minnesota game 2 weeks ago, but like, bro, like clearly that's not a fair catch call. Like he ran the ball back to the
Oh yeah,
house,
yeah, 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 yeah.
like, and that's it's kind of a weird thing to be in that position where you're like, all right, special teams has to make a play, defense has to make a play, because that's not how most football teams operate. They're like, all right, I'm just gonna like throw this ball in the direction of my stud receiver who I know is going to make a play and do something with it. But it's just that whole like the defense has to do it because nobody else can.
Is there a story behind Beacon Hill, your quarterback, as to like why he still has the job or how he got the job? Because again, I haven't watched an Iowa game all year, but his QBR is at 9.9
Yeah.
and his
Yeah.
completion percentage is 41.6.
Yeah. So,
So
yeah. So, in the offseason, transfer portal, we brought in Cade McNamara from Michigan, who had lost the starting job last season to JJ McCarthy, had led Michigan to college football playoff the season before that, beat Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. So we brought him in, brought in his buddy Eric All to play tight end. Cade had surgery in the offseason on his knee, his leg, something, and was doing okay. He was doing okay. We're very thin at receiver, and the offensive line has not really like progressed, which is a whole separate massive issue. And then Cade goes down. He's injured out for the rest of the season. I think tore his ACL or something. He's done for the season. So then we put in Deacon Hill. Deacon transferred from Wisconsin. He's enormous. He's an absolutely enormous man, like over 6 feet. He's like 250. Just he looks like a lineman, and he's playing quarterback. His thing is like, I think some of it is nobody really like prepped him for the job because everybody was just like, oh yeah, okay, it's gonna be Cade. So like whatever, we don't need like whatever. He's a project. We know he's a project. We'll give him time. But then like, oh yeah, we don't have time now. He's a lot of his biggest problems have been like just ball protection. Like he has I want to say like 3 fumbles in the last 2 games. Like it's been bad. It's been really bad. He's not great at decision making. It doesn't help that the receivers are not great, and then like usually the thing that an Iowa quarterback would look to is the tight end. Well, we had 2 starting tight ends, Eric All, who transferred from Michigan, and Luke Lachey, who's been on the roster for a while, and he's like the next guy in there. Both of those tight ends are out for the season with injuries. And so now we're on our 3rd string tight end, which at Iowa, like it's still going to be a good player, but we already had 2 guys who are probably going to get drafted. And now like we don't have them. And so when you don't have your leading receivers who are tight ends, your receivers aren't doing much. It just limits what this guy is going to be able to do,
yeah, it almost feels like I keep hearing this term thrown around with like urban areas like San Francisco or maybe Philadelphia. Philadelphia wouldn't be, but let's just go with San Francisco, like a doom loop.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Right? It
yeah,
feels like
yeah.
Iowa is in a doom loop when it comes to like wide receivers. Like they can't get wide receivers because it's
Well, yeah.
Iowa.
How do you sell like, hey, come to Iowa? You can play receiver at Iowa. Like, what kid paying attention to the state of the world in
Right.
the year of our Lord 2023 is going to be like, yeah, I'll go to Iowa, play wide receiver. Like, how do you sell that?
Well, and there's a
It's
certain
impossible.
personality too that plays wide receiver, and they're probably not like, you know what, Iowa City,
Right,
that's the
right.
perfect place for me.
Now,
Unless
I
like
will say
Joe Jurevicius was
there's a
really good.
couple of other like things at play here. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Very
There's a
fine.
couple other things here at play that Kirk Ferentz is incredibly stubborn when it comes to making like personnel changes. He just doesn't like. I mean, he does not like, and we've had some rough years with some rough quarterbacks, and he just doesn't. He just does not want to make changes. We've actually lost some wide receiver talent last season. At the beginning of last season, this receiver transferred out, Charlie Jones, transfers to Purdue and becomes like Purdue's like stud receiver is like unbeatable,
Yeah.
right? Just like embarrassing people, putting up huge games every week, and so like it's stuff like that where we have the guys, but they don't even want to play here because they know it's a joke.
Yes,
So
like
kind of
instead
like
of a
what you're saying, it's
brain.
like, yeah, it's that doom loop that you're talking about. Like when the rats are fleeing the ship, man, like you got to do, you got to do something. You got to
I
do
was gonna make a
something.
really bad joke that I'm still gonna try to make, which is like instead of a brain drain, you have like a hand drain. Again, it was horrible, but yeah, they're like with the transfer portal, with the transfer portal, like you could get guys in, you can't, and then the guys that are like, I know I'm good, and the guy throwing the ball can't throw it. And if he does, he's throwing it to a tight end. Why am I staying here?
Right.
It's got to make things hard. I've got two questions. I think we've got about 12 minutes left. Um, I haven't done a ton of a deep dive into the Pac-12 coming in. So you've got Washington, Oregon, USC, and UCLA. That's
Yeah.
it, right? Am I
Yep.
okay?
At least
And
so
so I'm
far. Yeah.
assuming they're going to be in the West, or they're doing
Big
away with
Ten is
divisions, right?
Big Ten is scrapping divisions after this year.
So are is there like a feeling among the Iowa faithful about having to play two teams from Los Angeles, or like some having these West Coast teams come in? Because I think going back to how we started the conversation too, there's I'm gonna go out on a limb here and feel free to call me out. I don't see like a huge cultural divide between Wisconsin and Iowa,
Oh no,
or
that's
a
no.
huge
It's
cultural
very
divide,
similar. Yeah.
right? Um, but I do think there's a big divide between Seattle and Iowa City, or Los
Yep.
Angeles and Iowa City. So has anyone made any hay of that, or is that kind of just like a more the merrier? Or the last thing I'll say, and then I'll toss it back to you, sorry, is like this feels like it neuters the Rose Bowl a little bit. Um,
So
or has
let's
that even
start, and then we'll talk
been
about the Rose Bowl because that's the whole deal. Yeah.
okay? And we got a
Um,
10-minute warning, sorry.
okay. So as far as like adding those West Coast teams, I think what it's going to do is the teams that have traditionally been in the upper middle of the conference. So I'm talking about Iowa, Wisconsin, Purdue to maybe a lesser extent, maybe Nebraska. I think those teams are just going to like become less and less relevant nationally. Um, and those West Coast teams, now that you can't cry West Coast bias anymore, like I think they're gonna, or East Coast bias, that like nobody pays attention to the Pac-12. I think those teams are going to get a little bit of a boost by being in the Big Ten just from media exposure alone, and that's gonna translate to recruiting, right? That's like going to be the biggest problem. Now, what it also does is it opens recruiting to those places also for Iowa and Wisconsin and Purdue and Nebraska and those places where like traditionally you've been a little bit more regional in your recruiting. Now, well, we're going to have a home game in LA, so your family can see you. Why don't you come play for us? So it kind of cuts both ways, but I think in the broad sense, like you're going to see less and less of those upper middle tier, traditionally like Big Ten teams. I would say as far as like playing those teams, look, Iowa wants to be that team where you see Iowa on the schedule and you're like, wait, are we going to Iowa City or is it a home game? And if it's in Iowa City, you don't want to play that game. That's who Iowa wants to be, is like, because if you go to Iowa City, you might lose no matter how good you are. You could be like, this happened to Ohio State a few years back. Ohio State came into Iowa City. Iowa was having a whatever season, and we beat Ohio State 55-24 with a Brian Ferentz led offense of all things, right? So like that's who Iowa wants to be. He's like, you don't want to come to Iowa City and play us. So USC wants to come in Washington wants to come in, like, man, enjoy Iowa City in November. Have fun, guys, because you're gonna hate it and we're gonna love it. Um, Now, as far as the Rose Bowl goes, yeah, like, I mean, the Rose Bowl, as far as like the Big Ten, Pac-10, Big Ten, Pac-12, whatever, man, that's dead and buried. It's over. We've just been separated from that completely, which is a bummer. Although we don't get to play in the Rose Bowl game, like the New Year's, like whatever thing anymore, but we'll still get to play games in the Rose Bowl. Iowa plays UCLA in the Rose Bowl stadium. So like it's gonna happen, but yeah, that used to be like a big deal. It's
Sure.
just it's kind of over now, you know.
Yeah. No, yeah, I wasn't. I mean, yeah, in some sense, it's like this train has already left the station before the teams even arrived in the Big Ten. I have two questions left. We have 6 minutes.
Okay.
Do you have any thoughts on the game this weekend against Rutgers, or is this just like another team that's rolling in there?
Um, I mean, I have two separate conflicting opinions of this. Like, there's a version where this game is like a 10-7 slugfest or even lower. It could be at like a 9-6 slugfest. And like, Iowa wins on a walk-off field goal or something, like that easily could be the game. I also like have a feeling that it could just turn into a total blowout. And Rutgers is having a fairly decent season, like all things considered, like they're doing okay. But Iowa has not lost to Rutgers yet. They're 3-0 against Rutgers. Um, I don't think that's going to change. I think Rutgers might have some success early, but just Iowa's defense is just they're gonna they're just gonna overwhelm eventually whatever Rutgers can do. They've got some playmakers, they can do some stuff, but I think just in the end, I don't think there's going to be a chance for Rutgers really to win this game.
So, and this brings to the last question in a nice perfect circle. You started basically your Iowa career with Kirk Ferentz. When
Yeah,
does he leave, or how does that happen, or does he die there?
yeah. So we're in the place now. I feel like Penn State was with Joe Paterno, where it's like kind of in the twilight of his career, and it's like, hey man, thank you for everything you've done for us. You've taken us to the mountaintop, or as close as I was ever going to get to the mountaintop. Thank you for your service. You're awesome. You're a legend. We will have a statue of you outside the stadium. Please move to Arizona and enjoy your retirement. Um, when will that happen? I don't know. There's also a good portion of the Iowa faithful that's like, we've seen this before. We've been 4-8. We've been, we went from 4-8 to an undefeated regular season, a few years ago, and those were like 3 seasons apart. That happened. So like, I don't know. I think Kirk Ferentz is just like, I think he's going to be here until he has a reason to leave. Now it's super weird that his kid is like getting kicked out and he's gonna stay. I mean, like, that's awkward. But ultimately, I think he's gonna stick around because like there's nobody that I can think of waiting in the wings who's like a good replacement. And that's the biggest thing. Is like I think the AD, I think the boosters, I think all those people like look around at the landscape right now and they're like, well, if Kirk walks, who do we get? We don't, there's no, who's the hot coach that would like take over an Iowa program and like take them somewhere? I don't know who that would be.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
I think the thing that really like got me was when you said that for many Iowa fans, it's unrealistic to get a conference title and win a national title. So this is just kind of like who we are.
yeah, yeah.
And I just think about Oklahoma. And if someone was like, look, guys, we're not going to win a Big 12 title and we're not going to win a national title. You just need to like suck it up and embrace it. You would get like thrown rocks would
Oh
be
yeah,
thrown at you,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you may
yeah.
like wind up on the side of an alley. Um,
I mean,
So
it's
I
it's not that we don't want those things. Sure, we want those things, but it's just like you got to know who you are. Like Iowa's going to be nationally relevant every decade or so. Iowa might be in the national title consideration maybe like once in a generation. It's not going to be like a every year, starting off the season in a top five. That's unrealistic, you know.
well, I mean, I admire that quality about Iowa and Iowa fans. But yeah, it's just so I think that's kind of to like wrap it all up. It's from the outside looking in, it is such a difference compared to what gets all the national noise and how it's been yet so sustainable for so long.
Yeah. I mean, he's Kirk has his formula that he just sticks to it, man. And that's just what he's gonna do, and he's not gonna change. And somehow it all just works out. I don't know.
All right, well, I will do my best to watch Iowa slowly but surely and methodically march to the 50-yard line and
Yeah,
punt the
maybe
ball.
like have something else going on. Don't you can't watch an Iowa. You need to watch Iowa like you watch baseball. Like you're doing something else, and then you like kind of check in, and then you go do something else, and you kind of check in again. Like don't watch every play. You're just gonna hate yourself.
Just utilize the YouTube multi-view. Just kind of
Oh
have
yeah,
it,
please, please. Yeah,
have it going.
yeah,
All right, man. Well, I appreciate the time. It was good talking to you,
yeah,
and
man.
thanks for the insight on Iowa.
Yeah, happy to help.
All right, man. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah. See ya.
See ya.